I'll go first.
Go on then.
Because I've got one. Because I despise this talking point. And it was, they're not their fault, right? Okay. But they were like they're the starters of it, right? Okay. And it was it was LS and Kedro and all the people yapping about fucking Fearless Draft and selling Fearless Draft, right? I'm going to break it something. Fearless Draft is a steaming pile of fucking dog shit. Do you want to know why I've watched? No, because I had to watch it in LDL now for I think 2 years, and I've now had to watch it in LPL for like the first split section. And if you've not watched those sections, just go and watch them. It's fucking terrible. Nobody would want to put themselves through it because it doesn't actually fix the thing you think is a problem. Like everyone like talks about it in terms of like, oh, it creates champion diversity. Does it fuck? Basically, one person plays the matchup and then the other person plays the exact same OP thing and then just the other matchup, and then even if, because usually BO3, if it is a third game, then you might see interesting picks, but not that interesting because they usually just move on to draft B of what would be a BO5, and they do that there. And so you only, like, the only way you ever actually see Fearless Draft get anywhere near interesting is if you go to like game 4 and game 5 of like a end of like series. And that's like basically like that's the implementation that was like provided the most. But you already have like really like good like draft implementation. Like go look at like the LCK, Korea right now. Famous for rigidity is now playing the Garen Nasus in terms of like counter solving each other. You have changes in the ADC metas. You have like top lane counter pick being utilised like heavily, very effectively all the time. And then here's the ultimate cracker. I want to see the best players in the world playing what they're best at. I don't fucking care if Chovy's forced to play Soraka mid. I don't want to watch that. I want to watch Chovy bang cunts day in and day out on Corki and Tristana, like shooting fucking people's heads off me. I don't want to see fucking that nonsense. Who? What are we watching for? Like, what are we watching for? This is so stupid. It's unbelievably like. Oh.
He started off on a hot one. Fair enough. Okay, go. What do you think, Sabaty?
I can't. The problem is, I agree. I think it's horseshit. I think Fearless Draft is horseshit. I feel like it's one of the. I want to think I'm clever because I don't understand the problem type of solution. I think that the League of Legends, draft plays such a key role in the game. Everybody understands that. I think this is why so many people that do not understand the game comes with draft, because that's the only layer of analysis they do understand. That's how predominant, right, draft is in League of Legends. And if you think about it, right, the most important thing in draft is having space for expression, right? I think that everybody understands that with the current system of draft, there is a lack of player expression because everybody's condemned to play the very first few picks that take over the meta, right? That's everybody says that. And then what we're going to do to fix that is remove even more expression by just banning things that were successful for teams to make sure there will never be a run it back scenario, which is one of the most exciting thing ever in a series, right? It's like, oh, we played draft 1 and there is like a Baron steal, and they're like, guys, we'll run it back. It was just a Baron steal. And if they come back, it was, oh yeah, their counter draft was actually good. They just failed to execute. Or if they lose and they're 0-2 and they have shown like nothing pretty much, and so you start in game 3 and you're like, what do they have right back in the shop, right, to actually come back in this series? With that, this is a layer that's completely removed from LoL eSport. That's great. And the core problem is just the tremendous lack of bans, because bans should be a percentage coverage of the whole roster in a way that, if you have a normal distribution of power among the champions, in any statistic, operation, you would cut the tail ends, which is like the lower part and the higher part. So the lower part doesn't interest us because in this case, we want the best champions. But if you can cover enough of these top champions, then you have a lot of champions that have like defined strength and weaknesses, and matchups actually exist because there is not like one champion that covers all the matchups that you can just blind. And so red side surprisingly becomes way more stronger if you have less champions available, because champions have like blind sides, and that's kind of like the point of a MOBA. But instead of like, and that's why I'm so upset with this situation, is like Riot does understand the lack of expression and like, oh, you know what? We're just going to remove even more expression, and then you're going to be forced to play what you're not comfortable with. And your opponents who do know that the champion you picked in game 1 were very strong, they're going to get it. So you're going to get the B draft all the flip draft, as Keir said, against better champions. So we're just going to put people off comfort, and we're going to call it like creative, where there is no creativity, because the only reason something's creative, while we are excited about Nasus or Garen mid, is because it's a strategic choice. It's a tactical knowledge of the players that do understand the stake of the matchup and can find a counter pick that the opponent might not know. That's the Garen mid against the Nasus. None of this exists if everybody's forced to play just A and B draft of the current patch. And I think that's really the horseshit solution for something that's very simple. You just make 10 bans in 30 seconds, and then you play the draft in a way that you have the 10 top champions that are out of the picture for your team, and then you start playing the draft normally. But since I don't want to do that, we just have to go with like random ass carousel.
Okay, I do like this take. Because I obviously was, even though it's already, I already wasn't a fan of the Fearless Draft anyway. Like, I'm one of the people where even when it was conceptually presented before it had ever been used, I had like 50 obvious reasons it wouldn't be good. So I'll run through some of them, but I'll try and relate to what I've actually seen of the Fearless Draft, because they do it in LDL now, if people don't know. Not just those exhibition tournaments. So, first things first, is Kiray's angle. The whole reason I watch League of Legends is to watch the best players piloting the champions they're the best on. That's my dream scenario. Like, I'll give you an obvious example that comes to mind very recently if you watch the LPL. If Xiaohu is playing and Lucian is in the meta, I want to see him play it. He might be like the best player ever on that. And he played it top and mid in the past. He's unbelievable. He went to an ADC. Like, he's always going to be a god on that. You think of like historical examples, Mad Life on Thresh or Blitzcrank. Bro, imagine if in a best of 5 he could only play it once. What the fuck would that be? At the end of the day, here's the flaw I think they're doing with this. The mistake they're making is it's a classic thing a noob will always be find appealing. I can tell you in Counter-Strike, whenever I complain about the format of the major, by the way, it's the same format you're all going to complain about every year at Worlds now. It's that Swiss system where after round 1, it's not properly seeded. And so what you get is incredibly unfair matchups, like NRG never has to face an Asian team, but D plus KT has to face every Asian team. Like, those are so inherently unfair that when I argue against it, I've learned what people are saying back to me is they're not arguing my point. That, like in this case, they're not arguing against normal draft. What they're saying, if you boil down what they're saying is, yeah, but I think it will be more novel and exciting for me when random things can happen and matches can be upset and things can happen. So what they're always arguing against in the format is, I think it's exciting when crazy things happen. Now, first of all, that's an incredibly gauche way to enjoy a sport. Like, this isn't a movie that you're putting on as like, you know, on the background, like, oh, whoa, some crazy shit. Wow, look at the graphics. Like, you are trying to watch a high-level sport where people are professionals and they train and they try to be the best ever and understand the metagame and it has historical epic relevance. So already, that's kind of a bit lowbrow in my opinion. And secondly, if you just admitted, I just like Fearless Draft because I want any old shit to happen, well, we wouldn't include you in the conversation anymore. We'd go on in a separate room with the whole discussion of like, but is it good for the game? What does it have? So the reason I know this is what people think is, I'll give you a very quick analogy. Years and years ago when the poker boom first happened, I once played with a bunch of people at a Counter-Strike event. And one of the guys who was an owner of a team, obviously had like loads more money than the rest of us, and we were just like 19-year-old kids. So when he was playing, because I guess for him, the buy-in wasn't worth whatever it was, like $5 or whatever, you know. To him, it's like, I give a fuck less if I win $5 or lose $5. So I noticed when we were playing poker, he would just do that shit where he wasn't playing poker, he would just call down every single hand. Like, no matter what you bet, no matter what you did, he would just call it all the way down. And even if at the end he lost, he was like, what do I give a shit? And I said to him, yeah, but you're spoiling the game, mate. Like, in this scenario, what am I playing for fun at this point in time? If I know no matter what, I can never buff you, and you always call it. You know, and I said to him, basically, if you're going to play like that, mate, why even sit here for 3 hours and waste our time? How about this? I'll say however much you've got in your pocket, me and you'll flip a coin for it now. If you lose, get the fuck out and we can play poker. And the joke is, he went, okay then. And I realised, wait a minute, so that's all he ever wanted. He just wanted the thrill. He never cared about poker. So essentially, I would say the same thing about Fearless Draft. I think in the short term, a lot of fans just think, oh, it'd be so crazy and exciting. And then I'll connect it to a point you'll have all seen that drives me crazy as someone who knows pro players, because they do it in my game, Counter-Strike, as well. It's when the fan on Reddit goes, so you're telling me Scout, one of the best players who's paid to play this game, can't play, insert whatever champion they've decided he should play. And what they're always ignoring, same thing at Counter-Strike, they'll go, what, you can't even play 5 maps? And I always tell them, no, you haven't completed the sentence. Absolutely, Scout can play any champion in the game. You're asking him to play that champion against one of the top 10 players in the whole world and win. Now, notice what a different equation that is. Like, spoiler, that team you're saying can't play the 6th map in Counter-Strike. Oh, they can. Against me and you, they dumpster us, mate. The question is, can they play a top 10 team in the world on that map? No, because that's my point, which is the ultimate point about Fearless Draft. The reason why even the greatest players in the world, beyond rare exceptions like a Chovy or a Knight, usually can't go 10 champions deep, because there's only so many hours in the day. Like, you know that Lucian I just mentioned about Zhao Hu? He's not really reaching back 3 years to grab that, guys. He must be practicing it now. He has to, even as the greatest now, he has to devote time now in his solo queue practice and scrims to playing some Lucian games to get good on it. So there's only a limited amount of time. If you then make it so you have to play 3 times more champions, we all shit out of luck, mate. It's going to make the level of the game degrade like a motherfucker. And then think about this angle, guys. Think about those scenarios where you all love, like, people who actually cause upsets like Adam. Adam can't exist in the Fearless Draft, you idiots. His whole shit is picking those 4 champions and knowing the matchup better than everyone else. He's actually, by the way, one of the best examples of why you should want the standard draft, so that then players like, and by the way, it doesn't have to be Adam, Power of Evil, my boy Froggen, these people, fucking Jensen even, he's on about 2.5 champions at this point in time. If you give these guys their classic champion, Jensen and Oriana, he's going to still be able to carry games because he's mastered that and he probably puts his hours in on it. If you make it Fearless Draft, by the time we're on game 4, some of these series, it's going to be fucking shit. And then the last thing I'll say, 2 quick things. One, another thing that's beautiful if you love laning, and everyone knows I'm a fan of that because some of the players I like, the most beautiful laning performance is when you beat the guy on both sides of the matchup in a series. That's like, what do you want me to say at that point in time? I beat you on the one you thought was stronger. Then I went, you know what, you have that, I'll take it. Oh, I beat you on that too. That's gangster. Well, first of all, you're not going to get that as often in this scenario because the matchups just won't work the same in draft when the other guy can't even threaten to pick that again. And then secondly, this is the last angle I'll say, which is if anyone knows very briefly the concept of the British game Knockout Whist, it's a card game. It's essentially the same as the game Top Trumps, if people know. You have a game where you have cards with different metrics on, and what you do is when it's your turn to pick the trump, or the metric in this case, you say spades or strength or something. And then the idea goes at this, Aberdeen. Because I say strength or spades, I throw a card down, and whoever has the highest spade or strength metric, he wins that round, right? Well, the actual strategy, if people don't know the metagame strategy of that game, isn't just play your strongest card. It's actually that because when I set the trump, you can choose which of your spades to put down. Well, if you have 2 spades, since you know I'm taking spades, I've probably got a high one, right? So what you're going to do first time, Aberdeen, is play your lowest spade because you know I'm probably going to win this hand. Then you're going to try and save your highest spade later, hoping I've used mine. Then you get. That's all this draft will become, by the way, as well. It won't be what you hope it will be. What's great about standard draft, this is my final point, is this. Actually, unless you're some god tier Korean team 10 years ago playing a Western team and you want to style on them in game 1, you're picking your best draft in game 1. Then you're adjusting between the games. In the modern Fearless Draft, you won't always pick your best draft in game 1 because actually, if you fuck it up and mis-execute 1 or 2 of those champions, you can't play them again for the rest of the best of 5. So actually, what it will then become also is some sort of weird compromise on like, right, well, when do I actually put his strong champion out there? When do I gamble? And it won't be in a good way, like I'm doing it because I'm predicting what they're going to do. And lastly, I'll just say this. If you want a really hot take, I'll spin off of that. I'd even argue that beyond noob leagues, where this might be fun, if anything, the more interesting one would be the opposite draft, which would be we decide the draft a week in advance and you have a week to prep those champions. The other angle, actually, sort of like the StarCraft thing of like trying to snipe me. Like, you know already that I've picked a weird matchup, but you've got 3 days to prep it. That would actually, I think, be more interesting if you actually like high-level League of Legends. So, yeah, I actually think it's a great point. I agree with it. It's obviously not that hot for us, but I think fans... You're right. I think fans are already in on that idea, man. If anything, they want it like implemented worldwide or something wild, right?
Yeah, and the thing is the rumor right now, right, is so the big rumor right now is that the new tournament is possibly going to be Fearless Draft. This new
the international one.
Yeah, this theoretical tournament is possibly going to be Fearless.
The spring one or whatever.
Yeah, I think like that's like the rumor, right? Okay, the ghost, right? First of all, that will completely devalue the tournament because as a novel tournament, I actually think the best concept in League, just a little knockoff of this, would be like generals. Your coach can speak during the game. I think that would be fucking.
That's interesting.
So good.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can record little sound bites of like the coach talking to his players during the game. And that would be like a really interesting, like novel, like tournament and stuff like that. And because you'd have the cross-pollination of like what are the Chinese coaches saying versus the LCK coaches, the EU, the NA. That would be like really interesting. I am like so And I'm watching tier 2 doggers in fucking China, right? These people are terrible. They're literally changing name ID like midweek and stuff. You're never going to know who they are. And I'm not even interested with it there. It's so boring. The last thing I would want is like Knight to be playing less Nico games. Knight, you know what I mean? Fucking Chove to be playing less Azir. Like, who would want that? I don't know, like, people, I don't think folk realising the consequences of what they're going to ask for is what it's going to correlate to. So yeah, that's my one there, boys. Easily done.
I don't think there is ever an occurrence in Thorin, you've been watching esports for longer than I did, but I don't think ever in any game I've watched lowering the skill or the strategical expression of a player or a team has been something positive eventually for the game. I can't recall a single occurrence of it, ever. Everything that got narrowed, like side laning got narrowed.
By the way, let me ask you this.
Boring.
You were someone who worked as a coach, so I'm just speculating as an outsider who knows players, but would you agree with my premise there? The fan, I think, thinks the opposite to me and you, Zabatine. They think that if you've, like I said about, why don't you practice it if you're a pro? They think if we do Fearless Draft, all the pros will just become good on 50 champions. I actually think they'll become slightly better on the ones they're forced to, but they'll become worse on their mains. Like, would you agree? You'll actually lower how good people are on their best champions too, right?
I feel like I hope that one day, one team, content team is going to produce a one day, like real time, to see how narrow, like the time frame you have as a player to hone your own skills.
Yes.
You have so many imperatives, right? And you have screams and feedbacks and discussions. And then I was working in NA, meaning that every single queue time is 20 minutes and you have a Nunu top that play Ghost Clans and you're just losing this game. There is nothing to do. And then you tag again and you listen to music, you play a side game. But I remember Crown looking at me as like losing his mind. I was like, bro, I just want to play the game, you know? So, and it's not the only one. Like I can recall plenty of names of players that were like this. So what are you going to ask? You think you're going to play like Riven mid? It's going to be the champions that are the most consistent in the game are going to be the most represented. So right now we have the ADC meta. But after the layer of the ADC meta, imagine you ban Lucian, Corki, Tristana, and Zeri, and so on. It's going to be Orianna versus Azir, and it's going to be Azir versus Orianna. And when Orianna and Azir are banned, it's going to be LeBlanc, and after LeBlanc, it's going to be maybe Zoe or Victor, because control mages have the least risk for the average reward. So players are just going to become all BDDs. And you're going to narrow the quality of a player such as BDD who excels at control mages because everybody's going to have to pick them. And it's going to feel very, very dull eventually. There is not a single... The only reason a champion is exciting to be watched is because people picked it. It's because it's a result of a cognitive decision of thinking that the strength of this champion in this specific situation is going to be good for the team. This is skill. And I mean... I've watched a lot of esports, whether it's fighting games, you know, I don't think that narrowing expression is one thing that's like positive for on the long run. And it kind of shows for me a failure on Riot Games' side to understand what's at stake with narrowing the amount of analysis, break time, drafts recorded, fearless draft. It's like nobody cares about analysis, nobody cares about strategy. The only thing that people care about is fighting. But the thing is, yes, on the short term, but you're going to see that in 3-4 years, when the game is just going to be like team fighting at Drake's, and none of the picks or the situation are going to be created out of strategy or choices, people are going to be like, yeah, this is basically a TFT with players playing the fights. And it's going to feel very, very bad.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.